Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining the course. Welcome to the course of Economic Cooperation in ASEAN. Please excuse me to use English as the medium if you are from the course of Kerjasama Ekonomi di ASEAN, because I want to use this video as well as a medium of study for you guys, in which we don't usually use English as a medium. Instead we use Bahasa Indonesia, but in this case I have to apologize that in order to make it efficient, I will also use this to your class. We will continue the course and the explanation on ASEAN Economic Community. By the way, I'm speaking from Sidoimoyo village of Gadjah. It's located in the western part of Sleman, where I live. It is 8 in the evening, so very good evening to you guys. You might watch this video in the afternoon or in the morning, so good afternoon and good morning also for you. Good day. Our topic today is the progress on ASEAN Economic Community. It is planned to be the 8th meeting. As we have discussed about the role of economic major power in the region, in the meeting 7 that I have delivered before, I think in the early week of this course. So yesterday we talked about topic on meeting 6, and today it is for meeting 8. I hope you don't mind with the arrangement. Now, still we are in the situation when we could not organize face-to-face meeting for the class. Nevertheless, I hope you guys are still in a good spirit, good condition and good health. Don't forget to put attention on personal hygiene, also self-distancing. We are all restrained to have meetings with a lot of people in order to mitigate the spread of coronavirus. So have courage, have faith, and victory will be ours. It is our universal struggle against the virus. Good luck for us. Now, meeting 8, progress on ASEAN Economic Community. We will also distribute the material on Facebook group, so you can access the PPT material there. Before we talk about the detail, I would like to remind you that ASEAN has now established 3 pillars of cooperation. The communities, first initiated in Bali Concord, second in Bali 2003, and institutionalized within the ASEAN Charter that has now put into force. Those three pillars are namely the ASEAN Political Security Community, ASEAN Economic Community, and ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. And most of our discussions throughout this course belongs to the pillar of ASEAN Economic Community. In ASEAN Political Security Community, you have cooperation, you have meetings for the ASEAN Ministerial Meeting, the Foreign Ministers, also the ASEAN Regional Forum, defense cooperation on law, and also cooperation in tackling transnational crime. In ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community, the third pillar, you have cooperation on cultural and arts cooperation, exchange, also disaster management. It's quite interesting. ASEAN plays disaster management actually under the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. Also education, environment, haze, tackling the haze problem there. Also health, information, labor, rural development, and poverty eradication, social welfare and development, also women and youth. Those are cooperations that has been arranged under the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community. And our focus here, the ASEAN Economic Community, comprises of cooperation on trade, establishing ASEAN Free Trade Area, also in energy, food, agriculture, and forestry, finance, investment, minerals, also sub-regional organizations. We will be having dedicated meeting talking about sub-regional cooperation. Also cooperation on science and technology, transportation, telecommunication, and IT. Tourism, sectoral bodies also under the purview of ASEAN economic communities, and also the meeting of the ASEAN economic ministers. These are all the programs that the ASEAN Secretariat helped to put office. The ASEAN economic community can be understood through functionalism approach. This theory believes that functional cooperations on issues that are less sensitive can eventually bring a deeper regional cooperation. And here I put there, being initiated and driven by political motives, ASEAN itself or its sustainability, ASEAN sustainability as a cohesive regional organization depend on functionalist approach. This approach argues that regionalism should keeps working on less sensitive issues rather than stay in political or security deadlocks. There are so many examples that cooperation that is only based on political and security interests sometimes won't last long. Meanwhile, less sensitive issues such as economy can bring more assured cooperation. In fact, European Union itself also has this foundation of functionalism. If we talk about the creation of European Coal and Steel Community, and also Euratom. Later, it developed into more and more scope of cooperation and getting deeper in its intensity and peak until the Maastricht Treaty in 1992. That was the foundation for European Economic Community and European Union itself. And under this view of functionalism, by having a prosperous region, the necessity to have armed conflict diminished. The cost of having open conflict would be way higher than to gain economic benefits from peace. So once you understand that interdependency of economic activities can give you benefit, and this benefit will reduce the possibility of having war. Why should we bother to have war if we could be prosperous together, working together? Hence, compared to the other pillars, as you might see from the previous slide, the ASEAN Economic Community is more progressive in terms of target achievement, and also if you count the number of negotiated arrangement, there are so many in ASEAN Economic Community. Factors supporting the progress of AEC, we has discussed. First, it is working on less sensitive issues. Second, it is related to tangible cooperation. Unlike political, sometimes if you are talking, let's say, democratization or political development, sometimes ASEAN countries rebut the challenge the conception with their own version of conception, and some of them think that it is political and values are not tangible enough for them. Meanwhile, when talking about economic sector or economic cooperation, they can see the result in a material way. Hence, sometimes they are more open towards the arrangement. It does mean it the outcome can be measured. And if you check the ASEAN Charter, there is this interesting formula of ASEAN minus X principle, in which in economic cooperation, whenever ASEAN want to set a new arrangement, they don't have to really weigh the readiness of all member countries. The ASEAN minus X formula entails or imposes the clause of allowing other member states that are not ready yet to postpone the involvement or postpone the ratification of the agreement, so that they are not bound into the arrangement. Only those who are ready can proceed with the implementation of the cooperation. Now, those arguments constitute the dominance of functionalist approach on ASEAN development. Now, here is the example of the ASEAN -X in practice. In the next slide, you see there the example in January the 1st, 2010. All tariffs of products listed in the Common Effective Preferential Tariff have been eliminated for intra-ASEAN trade. The average tariff is down to 0.9%. In 2009, was down to 0.9%. Meanwhile, previously in 2000, in the year of 2000, the tariff was averagely 4.4%. So significant improvement on the elimination of tariffs for trade. Now, however, when we talk about the early development of ASEAN economic community cooperation, it didn't include CLMV countries. Should wait until they are actually ready. And due to the share of the ASEAN 6, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore and Thailand is representing 99% of total tariff lines. Of course, the trade between CLMV and other 6 ASEAN countries were not that high yet, so these 4 countries, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam, can postpone or can wait for the implementation of CEPT, the Common Effective Preferential Tariff. You cannot really replicate this kind of philosophy, this kind of approach to a political sector. We can still remember in 2002, for example, in the case of human rights scrutiny, international community has scrutinized Myanmar over military juntas, poor treatment and protection to human rights in Burma, in Myanmar. However, ASEAN cannot really force the discussion and the pressure towards Myanmar, as demonstrated by the veto done by Myanmar in order to block the discussion, and even to expel Ibrahim Gambari, the special envoy for the human rights issues in Myanmar, not to attend ASEAN Summit. It's difficult to compare both sector of cooperation. Economic cooperation might get rejection, smaller rejection risk if you want to compare it with the political one. Now, the ASEAN economic community also wants to create more free flow of goods. As you know that there are a lot of other Southeast Asian countries product can be found here in Indonesia. If you buy Nivea Men, which I also use sometimes, some of them were produced in Thailand and imported here in Indonesia. Some cars can be imported. You can find Proton, for example. By the way, if you have car with ASEAN member countries number, registration number, police number, you can drive your vehicle, your car to other country in ASEAN, and police cannot stop you and fine you. Yeah, it's legal actually. Now also there is this concept called the rules of origin, or ROO. Yeah, it means good or goods manufactured or produced in ASEAN member states enjoy the preferential tariff concessions when they manufacture or process any goods for export to other ASEAN member states. And the threshold for these rules of origin is 40% regional value content. And the cars registered in ASEAN countries are also allowed to be used in Indonesian streets. So rules of origin are very important. It can create a single production base, so not only a single market but also production base for the whole of ASEAN market. Now it has, or it aims also the free flow of services, in which it will liberalize services trade. We have now the established ASEAN Framework Agreement on Services, or FAS, including business services, there environmental services, professional services, healthcare, construction, maritime transport, distribution, telecommunication, education, and also tourism. And also what we understand as the mutual recognition arrangement for the professionals, so that their skills can be acknowledged, regarded as the same standard of skills in other ASEAN member countries, such as in medical and dental practitioners. If you got the ASEAN Medical Association of Southeast Asian Nation certification, you can practically also have the chance to work in other ASEAN member countries. Yeah. Engineering services, also nursing services, architectural services, and surveying qualifications. So these sectors of professionals and qualifications are targeted to increase free flow of services in ASEAN. Now, if you check our undergraduate program qualification, we have now been certified by the ASEAN University Network, the AUNQA, the Quality Assurance Mechanism. It means that our standard of service has met the standard of ASEAN or the region. And it's good for student mobility. You can have an exchange, and we can ensure the transfer system. We have this same quality level of education, research, and also service with other ASEAN universities such as Chulalongkorn, Thammasat, University Malaya, so that you can ease the student mobility across the region. It's good for creating more sense of belonging and common identity within the region. Now also the free flow of investment and capital in the next slide. We have the ASEAN Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, the ACIA, to complement for foreign direct investment. A lot of ASEAN countries are still in dire need for foreign direct investment in order to catch up with technology, transfer of knowledge, so on and so forth, capital to run the business. And it is promoted for business in ASEAN to invest in other ASEAN member countries. With ACIA, both ASEAN investors and ASEAN-based foreign investors does not necessarily need to be purely ASEAN investors. Those who are having base in ASEAN, for example, have a headquarter in Singapore or in Thailand, they can gain greater liberalization in investment and increase investment protection. Now we also have, in order to create assurance for the region in the case that global economic crisis or regional financial crisis struck, ASEAN has established this Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateralization, CMIM, as collective response of ASEAN, China, Japan, and South Korea to tackle global crisis. And this is a collection of money of 120 billion US dollars swap arrangement. Whenever crisis comes, Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateralization can be used to help the troubled countries. Now let us take a look at the progress in 2010. 2 years after the ASEAN chapter effectively put into force. Single market and production base has reached 82% of the targeted rate on liberalization and facilitation of free flow of goods, services, investment, skilled labor, and capital. In competitive economic region, to help discuss harmonized competition policy, consumer protection laws, intellectual property rights, also ratifying transport agreements has reached 50%. And those programs related to equitable economic development, including the studies and the development of SMEs and initiative for ASEAN integration work plan, has reached 100%. It means they're managed to do all of the planned programs. And the integration with the global economy, the entry into force of free trade agreements has reached 100%. But of course, this assessment are self-assessment by ASEAN itself, and the targets achieved was 73.6% in 2010. On paper, it's a good thing, but maybe many more scholars have different opinion on how to compare the velocity or the progress of ASEAN cooperation with other regional organizations mechanism, or with other multilateral economic cooperations. And finally, the deadline initially is initiated in 2020, but in Kuala Lumpur they hasten, or they make it earlier, that the establishment of ASEAN Economic Community should be in 31st of December 2015, or at the New Year's Eve for 2016. So now we are living under the era of ASEAN Economic Community, and the elements of ASEAN Economic Community are still pretty much the derivation of the previous assessment in 2010. It still continued. The pillars that has been established or being established are the single market and production based, free flow of goods, services, investment capital, skilled labor, and plus two more components: priority integration sectors, food, agriculture, and forestry. Competitive economic region are still pretty much reflecting previous scorecard. They added taxation and e-commerce as well. Equitable economic development, SME development, and also initiative for ASEAN integrations quite the same. And the integration into global economy, which are aiming to have a coherent approach towards external economic relations, enhance participation in global supply networks. Now, what about the progress in I brought the progress in 2018. You can check on the table here. The tariffs for goods are pretty much reaching the satisfactory level. In agriculture and fisheries, 91-88% of the negotiated arrangement has been achieved. In rubber, in wood, textiles, automotive, electronics, consumers, resources, and many more. in average reaching 93% for tariff goods, and also the amounts of tariff goods are also quite good. The elimination of the tariff, so all green here in the two left columns. Meanwhile, non-tariff measures, like what we already talked last time on the topic of ASEAN economic challenge, here in automotive industry you can see the other non-tariff measures still showing the rate of 39% of achieved negotiation and arrangement. So it's still relatively very low because of the interest of the industry and the administration of member countries like Malaysia, maybe Thailand, Indonesia, still having kind of competition in automotive industry. So policymakers, they allow the tariff to be reduced, but maybe not for other non-tariff measures. Standard also has been harmonized, but they still can get a way of navigating alternative to hold the influx of imports on automotive and its mobility throughout the region. Here the healthcare, the labor mobility also pretty much are still the worst, I think, only 10%. So please check the red boxes. In healthcare, labor mobility is very low. Tourism actually also still pretty much low, 30%. Those who are working in tourism can really understand. Service restrictiveness on healthcare also very low. But no problem with the FDI. Yeah. This graphic tells us a lot of anomaly, and we can understand that to invest in creating health care infrastructure or hospitals might be easier than to open the border for professionals on medical sectors. We can understand because the Philippines also having a lot of good human resource on nursery. Indonesia also competing on this sector. So it is understandable that it is still pretty much protection, still getting protected. Yeah. Now, telecommunication on FDI restriction, in contrary, is pretty much lower than the other sectors, as the same level as e-commerce in ASEAN. The foreign direct investment or intra-ASEAN investment can be considered still pretty much low. Telecommunication, a lot of ASEAN member countries has their own state-owned enterprises working or focusing on telecommunication. In Indonesia, we have Telkomsel, pretty much subsidized and protected by the government. it is difficult to imagine that the administration will allow other big companies or multinational corporation to operate here in Indonesia. So the rate is still low. Now let us move to the next slide. Here the research done by Menon and Melendez is quite interesting. So far they try to measure this unbiasedly. They said that on the 27th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur stated that per end of October in 2015, ASEAN had implemented 92.7% of the 506 targeted measures for 2008 until 2015. However, according to Menon and Melendez, the implementation rate for a full AEC scorecard of 611 measures stood at only 79.5%. So if we compare with the progress in 2010, the progress was 73.6%, and in 2015 it raised by roughly more or less 3%, 3.2% to 79.5%, and well, not so much. So we can say that, or some of us can say that it's a relatively slow pace of progress. Now, meanwhile, ASEAN Secretariat believes that they actually has reached a quite good number of progress. On first pillar, the single market and production base has reached 92.4% of implemented arrangements. In competitive economic region, 90.5% of implemented arrangement, and the rest, the equitable economic development and integration into the global economy, has reached 100%. Now here Menon and Melendez wanted to give a clear explanation why this gap of analytical gap can occur. Now they ask us to check the definition or the understanding of ASEAN Economic Community Scorecard. Now, according to them, the AEC scorecard is a self-assessment tool that monitors the achievement of milestones indicated in the Economic Blueprint Strategic Schedule. So, ASEAN create this plan, this roadmap for ASEAN Economic Community, and they self-assess whether ASEAN has actually implement the plan roadmap. Of course, they are doing. They are exactly doing this. Hence, we can say that it is a self-assessment tool and less of scholarly, critically assess the progress. So we really need those people outside ASEAN Secretariat to have the same share of monitoring. We have a lot of think tanks here in Southeast Asia that can help, that can also contribute for the betterment of the implementation of ASEAN Economic Community. And they should be endorsed, they should be invited, so we can reduce the democratic gap of public participation on ASEAN mechanism, and it can help ASEAN to reach its aims to be a people-centered regional organization in the future. Now, second fact that we also a little bit surprised is that ASEAN Economic Scorecard were discontinued before 2016. The ASEAN Secretariat has published two scorecards covering the only two first phase of AEC implementation, which were in 2008 to 2009 and 2010 to 2011. And unfortunately, subsequent scorecards have not been made available to the public. Now, if you want transparency, this kind of report have to be made available to the public on a regular basis. If you want to have that in a 2 years period, then it is better for you to make it consistent, so that public can really see the progress, and also help to participate, to provide their own take and their own opinion on the economic cooperation. Now, also the weaknesses of this mechanism of assessing the progress of AEC lies within the characteristic of the scorecard itself. Firstly, AEC scorecard is a compliance tool that relies on self-assessment. It means that if ASEAN member states want or having a lack of will and perhaps capacity to work on this self-assessment, they won't be really good assessment input. Now, second, ASEAN scorecard measures aggregate progress and less working on the micro level. It weakened the deep validation and assessment for micro level of economic in the industry, SMEs itself, in the field, not only in the plan program. Perhaps ASEAN has their own program of capacity building for the SMEs, but the scope and effect of this cooperation are still pretty much minimum. Here in Indonesia, we have, or even in Jogja, we have hundreds of thousands of SMEs working on small economies, and this assessment or this involvement of ASEAN cooperation are still pretty much small in scale if we compare with what they have done in the ASEAN Secretariat and ASEAN and other ASEAN arrangement. Now, the free flow of goods, capital, skilled labor process at different speeds and according to each member state's readiness. It means there is no congruent, no similar phase of assessment, and it don't really portray the real situation in the field. Now, ASE scorecard does not try to analyze or explain the result, and it is not necessary or it is not sufficient for us. We want to understand why do you still have problems in reducing non-tariff barrier for automotive industry, for example. What happens with the tourism industry? What happens with the movement of the health services and professional on medics? So we really want to know what actually happened beyond the number that they show us. And also the country-based scorecards are kept confidential. Now, if you want to really see the development of ASEAN Initiative and its effect to Indonesia or to Myanmar or to Laos, to Cambodia, you can't really get the available data because the ASEAN Secretariat will keep it confidential. And I do really hope someday they can change this approach so that people and analysts and scholars can always refer to the data that they got from the member countries. So in general, Menon and Melendez gave us a really good insight on the flaws and their critical examination on ASEAN Economic Community scorecards. Now, hopefully this lecture can help you understand the situation at the moment in ASEAN Economic Community. It is not ideal, of course, but it also means we still have a lot of room for improvements. A lot of rooms of improvement and it is good for us to critically assess and contribute to the public debate for the betterment of ASEAN cooperation as a people-centered one. Okay, this is all. Almost reached 1 hour for our talk. Please let me know what do you think about this method of lecturing. We are expecting to have this kind of lecture if there is no further notice from the rectorate. So bear with me with this method. I hope you don't mind. This week we don't have any homework or assignment. Just want to remind you of the situation. And if you got so many tasks or homeworks, please do the homeworks and assignments with full responsibility, because it will give you benefits in the future, and also your academic development. Thank you very much, guys, for tonight's lecture. Stay healthy, and see you on the next opportunity. See you, guys.